Celtic Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. What a great day in Boston. This won't air till Monday, but Jon and myself and a guest, Bobby Manning, you know him from the Bobcast and the Celtics Blog podcast, is joining us because it's been a great day. Well, okay. It was a great evening in Boston at the TD Garden as we paid tribute to the one and only Paul Pierce, number 34. Sean Grande wrote some excellent words. He read them on the radio broadcast. Tommy did the voiceover with Sean Grande's words on a video tribute that played just before they raised number 34 to the rafters. Gentlemen, this was one heck of a ceremony, and if you're a Celtics fan and you didn't have tears in your eyes, then you're under the age of 5. Let's go to Bobby.
It brings me back to one of my earliest moments as a Celtics fan. That ceremony in 2009, it just had the same feel, the same darkness over the arena, and it was the same people. Just seeing Doc back in the scrum before the game with all the media talking to them, Rondo, KG being front row, them all talking about the good old days, Paul Pierce back in the house, and then just seeing Brad Stevens take that step back and letting it all happen when people were asking him about the team and everyone else. He was like, I was just a fan back then like all of you. It really, everything about this last week brought you back to 2008, 2009, and that was what it was all about, to create that feel again, to bring those same fans back in the stands. You saw everyone with their 2008 shirts on. It was a different era. It brought me back to the time, going back into the old videos where they played the organ after every time the Celtics scored. It was a different time, a different feel, and it was a special era in Celtics history. The tail end of that Paul Pierce era was sensational. It was what made me and many other people fans of this team back then, and I think it's a big reason a lot of young people like myself want to pursue covering this team because of Paul Pierce, because of that era.
I'll tell you, there was 2 eras of the Paul Pierce, or I should say of Paul Pierce's time. Obviously there was the Antoine Walker version of the Paul Pierce era, and then there's the Kevin Garnett segment of his career, and I enjoyed both, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Jon, Bobby's a little bit of a whippersnapper, right? You and I are equal in age to Paul. We grew up with Paul. We came of age with Paul. We had kids maybe a little bit before Paul. But at the same time, his first daughter was born in April of the year they won the championship in 2008. So, Jon, I think we've grown up on this guy. It was interesting to see Antoine in the crowd as well. I'm glad they included him.
Yeah, Antoine, I'm going to be polite. Yes, it was good to see Antoine there. It was good to see a lot of familiar faces there. Posey was there. Ty Lue was there, certainly, obviously with the team. There's a lot of people who weren't in that group.
James Posey.
Exactly. Posey was the guy I
They
was going to
stuck
talk
him off
about.
into the corner. What was that about? It was like Danny had to call his number and be like, hey, wait, James Posey's here.
Yeah,
he paid for his ticket.
He's off hugging people over there, I think. No, and Dana Barrows, he looks like some dude they pulled out of the stands. I don't know if he knew he was going to be up there, which was kind of a weird thing. But, look, we're old school. We do remember both, and you could maybe even say there were 3 Pierce eras. There was the the Patina era where everything was kind of in flux, and Ron Mercer's here, and wait, now we're going to add another wing, and how's that going to work? And then obviously his ascension under Jim O'Brien, to being a real superstar in this league. And I'd say Antoine Walker's demise and where Pierce kind of steps up. And I thought it was interesting. They talked a little bit about that in the ceremony. Obviously there was kind of somewhat of an awkward sense when Paul talks about how Danny got rid of everybody, and then, obviously
Cleaned
everyone's
house.
eyes
He said
start
clean,
right
he was
over.
cleaning
Yeah.
house, getting rid of everybody. Even
Yeah.
the very first Danny Ainge hug from Paul Pierce. Well, I know this is way reading into things, but I was actually sizing up how Paul was hugging everybody. Because after that, cause I only noticed the initial one with Danny and what you said, Jon, and I thought, let's see how he hugs everybody else. But I didn't see really a lot of difference, but that initial hug I thought was like, yeah, there's a little something in between them for Pierce not being here. And as happy as I am with the way things turned out, there is this little part of me that's like, boy, this would have been awesome if he finished his career with the Celtics at the end of last year.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt. That would have been just I would say a capper, but it was also cool the way it ended. And there was some wistfulness about the last few years and obviously what that did, but you also wouldn't have had the lead up to today's game with the Cavs looking the way it did. This would be the lone bright spot in the season because the Celtics would be in the depths of where they are had they not dealt Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett to the Nets. And obviously now with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and there's a future, and the other Nets pick becoming Kyrie Irving, and I mean, there's all these great things that happen because that deal did go down, as hard as that is to take. But I think, coming off of today's game, or I should say coming off of today's ceremony, I guess I'm just really, it's, kind of an emotional time to think about.
Did you tear
hard
up?
Times.
Be honest.
No, but I'm not like that.
Yeah.
Goosebumps. That's my
All right,
thing.
I teared
Goosebumps.
up. I teared
had
up.
the goosebumps.
I wasn't weeping, but I teared up. Bobby, come on, weigh in. Be honest.
I was in the house for that Brooklyn game when Pierce came back with Garnett for the first time, and that was tears that night. That was the fresh emotions of that trade rubbing off. There was a lot of space with this ceremony tonight. I mean, he retired a year ago. He hit that shot probably about a year ago with the Clippers at this point. And we've been seeing him in the studio ever since. Like, this whole thing with Pierce really hit that emotional high when he was dealt. Months after that, coming back in January with Garnett, that was the peak intensity of the Pierce emotion. It never got more intense than that. I've never heard the Garden louder than it was that night cheering for them. And a crap game too. If you remember that Nets Celtics game, that was one of the more horrific games I've seen over the last 10 years. And that place was jam-packed, posters everywhere, and the cheering would not stop all night long for them. Chants every 5 minutes. It was unbelievable. The video tributes, the volume that the stadium reached during those video tributes, each of them was phenomenal. So that topped this by a lot, but it brought you back to those moments. They even showed that moment in the middle of the broadcast tonight back with the Brooklyn game. There's a lot of emotion with these guys, and rightfully so. And you hear people trash talk Paul Pierce outside of Boston and not understand like his status in league history, even just Celtics history. People like that are removed from the emotions of the Celtics organization and Pierce and the fans. That little triangle right there is a very intense thing, and people on the outside don't seem to understand that.
Yeah. And, the other thing too is all of that heritage, but it also, your era gets tied to a player. And so as much as I think Paul Pierce is your Larry Bird, Bobby, for your generation, because there'll be players like Brown and Tatum that are developing their careers in basketball at the same time that you leave college and begin to develop your career. And that's kind of where that is for me. I think that's part of the reason I got tears is because I remember when Paul was just getting started, I was just getting started in life. And so, he went through a lot of hiccups and he made a lot of mistakes when he was young in certain ways. And some of those are actually my favorite moments. And that's a teaser for just a couple of minutes. I'm going to tell you about a conversation I had with Mike Gorman yesterday. And, so he made a lot of mistakes in that early going, but then you kind of mature and you get better at your career and you figure things out. And I think a lot of that is I know how much hard work and effort has gone into my career to get to where I am today. And I'm sure, Jon, you feel the same way. So it's like when you see these ceremonies where somebody like Paul Pierce and I think he exuded passion. It's the one thing that I really just loved about him so much. He exuded all of that passion, and that's what it takes to be on top. It's just what it is. You got to put in all the extra hours, the blood, sweat, and tears, and to see him just be able to sit back and reflect on all that. The only difference between him and me is that he gets to legit retire, and I'm only halfway through my career.
Well, he's not totally retired though. I mean, at least in the respect that, as Bobby said, we see him on ESPN every week. He's doing countdown. He's doing the jump. I mean, he's out there.
And he's going to take Danny's job. Danny called it, right?
Well,
that was, I think, the piece of interest. I think, other than Mike Zarin is the most eligible bachelor in Boston, I think
saw
this
his
was the second
follow-up tweet, right?
Yes, I hate Danny.
Oh, it was awesome.
Perfect. Picture perfect. But no, I think that's, in terms of, See, now the Zarin thing kind of sent me down that road. I was all teed up for
Tell you
it,
what,
but...
I'll save you. We'll do the quick, reminder that everybody can follow Celtic Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow your host, Justin, that's mine. That's me. At CSL_Justin. Jon is at CSL_Duke. The entire CLNS Media Network is at CLNS Media. And the Facebook page is Facebook.com/CLNS fans. You can follow Bobby at Real Bobby Manning. And don't forget to download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace. And the CLNS Radio YouTube channel with the round table. YouTube.com/CLNS Media. It's also got full-length locker room interviews and the Garden Report. So make sure you're checking that out on CLNS Media. Probably, I would say, the bestest network. So, Jon, I don't know if you want to finish your thought, but if not, I'm going to tee up kind of a discussion for us that comes on the heels of a discussion I had with Mike.
Well, maybe this is a good place for this conversation, because I think I want to give a shout out to our number 1B, fan favorite, and that's Sean Grandy. Sean Grandy wrote, the words, through which Tommy gave the voiceover for that epic, absolutely dynamite, video tribute that the Celtics did for Paul Pierce. And, I mean, that's the video tribute, of all video tributes the Celtics have ever done. I thought they did a great job when it came to, when Pierce returned, and Bobby talked about, they've done a great job with all of these. But that was, I mean, the words and the way Tommy delivered it, and it was just dynamite. I mean, it captured the moment, and it was, it got, other than mentioning his own kids, it was the second probably most emotional moment for Paul Pierce in today's event. So I just want to, give a shout out there to Sean, Tommy, and the Celtics staff for really pulling that together. Just an amazing effort, and really, really, really well done.
Yeah, and all the people in the video screen before that too, giving them the shout out, seeing Magic Johnson up there, Kobe Bryant, really all the characters.
No. Did you really? I don't want to hear anything about Kobe on this day. I wish we could have saved that.
Yeah, but when you think about Paul Pierce,
no, you're done.
Intertwined.
Can I get a buzzer? Is there a buzzer? I mean, you're the guest on my show now, and there's no Kobe Bryant talk on this show.
This is like the cuss button. This is the cuss button for KG's cuss button right there. It's the Kobe cuss button.
Really, Magic and Kobe. I get it. That's all fine and dandy, but from the fans' perspective, I could have done without it. It's great that they did it, yada, yada. So here's the thing. You mentioned Sean. He is a wordsmith. He did a beautiful job. Tommy did a superb job with the voiceover. I think Mike emceed nicely. Paul and Maxwell, if we want to just hit the whole round table of, voices of the Celtics and faces of the Celtics, Maxwell did a nice job of going back and forth with Pierce, ribbing each other over the last couple of days. But I think on the last show we talked about how I took my son to his very first Celtics game last Sunday, and so, I'm kind of ignorant to where things are at or how much preparation would go into a thing like today. So yesterday I called Mike up kind of unexpectedly just to take 5 minutes and say thank you, for waving us through the security guard usher guy and letting my son come down and introduce himself and being so gracious. And I caught him in the middle of getting things prepped up and studying for the gala last night that he had to MC before emceeing today's event. And so I was just, hey, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. But then he says, hey, what's your favorite Pierce moment? And so I'll cue it up this way. And you guys aren't going to like it either. I go, Mike, I'm sorry. This isn't going to help you. Whatever you're trying to put together, this isn't going to be helpful. But honestly, my favorite moment is when he and Antoine came out to the podium and Pierce had the bandage wrapped around his chin. And after the foul on Tinsley in 2005 playoffs against the Pacers, I was like, I'm sorry, but I just love sarcasm. And there was just like, that was visual sarcasm. And it got so bad that Antoine, I watched it on the YouTube. I hadn't seen it in a long time. I pulled it up on YouTube after I hung up because I was like, that was a stupid thing to say. And I watched the video and Antoine literally has to get up from the podium and walk away because he's losing it, like laughing because of the charade. So anyway, I thought I'd poke a little fun at myself and then cue it back up to you guys as, you know, for your favorite Pierce moment. Mine certainly probably should have been the shootout with LeBron, but instead it's 2005 in the gap of any kind of, I think they had actually reacquired Antoine, for that postseason run from Dallas. So, they weren't, you know, after that it got really ugly for a little bit, but I just loved it because I guess that's where it ties into the passion that I was talking about with Paul. He just wanted to win so bad. And he had a hard time controlling his emotions early on as a result. So what are your favorite moments? Let's go to Bobby first and then we'll hit Jon.
Yeah, with me, it comes to extending that Big Three era. It probably should have only lasted 2008 to 2010, that last finals run in 2010. But then in 11, they messed with the chemistry a little bit, the Kendrick Perkins trade. And then in the 2012, there weren't a lot of expectations at that point. All the energy, emotion around the league had been sucked out of the Celtics toward the Heat at that point with LeBron James and everything that was going on down there. And for them to get to the East Finals in 2012, such an underappreciated moment, probably because of what ended up happening in the end of the series there, rightfully so. But when Pierce hit the game winner in Miami and all the favoritism toward Miami and that whole crowd whited out down there and the shock on everyone's faces and the crowd, still one of the more iconic Pierce images ever. The green draped in front of all the white in the background as he nailed the shot for the win down there. The faces on all the fans in the background, just a quintessential Pierce picture, sucking the soul out of the opponents. They didn't win the series. It was sort of the epitome of that Pierce Big Three era. They got the first one, but they couldn't get the second one after that. But still an amazing moment, one I always go back and watch, and it was essential Pierce, the big moment at the end of the game, being there to rely upon whenever the Celtics need a bucket. He really gave them a bucket every time they needed to in crunch time. It's hard to remember a time that he failed to come up big for them in that moment.
Yeah, I think there's something special about that end of that run because I agree with you, Bobby. And he prolonged that probably longer than
even in 13. He took over point guard when Rondo went down. That is so underappreciated.
That's a really good point.
I mean, this is a guy who, he's in year 15 at that point, and he's taking the whole thing on. KG's playing on one leg. Ray's long gone. Rondo's hurt his knee, and Paul is the only thing that's holding that whole thing together. That was impressive. I'm not going to go there though, because I think Bobby really eloquently talked about that era. I'm going to go to the other end. I'm going to go a couple small moments. Him giving the hug to Rick Pitino, which ushered Pitino out the door. That was pretty nice. I'll talk about the fact that, that he was in LA when he became the mother bleeping truth. That was a pretty special moment. But I'm going to talk about, I think, the comeback. And the comeback against
the Nets, right?
Nets.
That was incredible.
That was his introduction to the main stage, and he had a really good year. Antoine was still looked at as the captain, the guy who was, navigating those waters, and he's just this wonderkind at that point. But Pierce kind of just that was him. All that was Antoine getting in his ear before that game. That's nice. But then it took 12 minutes of game action and 24-point, deficit to get to the point where they win that game. That was, to me, where he went to a special level. and he just didn't have the teammates around him for 4 more years or 5 more years after that point. So that was to me, that was like, okay, we have something here. It was the first time for me at that point. I was, 23 years old. It had been a long time since the Bird era was gone. So much disappointment, so much, bad things, and Len Bias and Reggie Lewis. It was the first glimmer of hope that we had, that there is a new era that will dawn here as Celtics fans. And it was where it all began, was that night. I mean, there was great stuff that season, but that was the capper of where we say, things are not going to be the way they have been. We're not going to wait for the superstar. We have one in our midst right here in Paul Pierce.
Well, and it was the beginning of a turnaround on New England sports in general, because the Patriots had won the Super Bowl in 2001 and Tom Brady, and then also the Sox started to get their rise and start to compete with the Yankees. I mean, the whole sports landscape had gone from at the time we were Cleveland, right? We were like the Browns.
Kinda.
We were bad. Dude, we were bad. I mean, I know Parcells did his thing in 96, but then it got bad again. All those years of being in trouble with the Celtics, but the whole thing started to turn. And you're absolutely right, John, that all became more and more focused on Pierce and his ability to lead the team. That's why he inevitably became the captain. And, you see Jeff Clark from Celtics blog over and over. He recites that Dead Poets Society quote, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." But yeah, he is forever our captain. Now, Hoops fans, listen up. Basketball season is winding, towards the All-Star break. So all of your favorite hardwood heroes have established their place on the stage, getting ready for the playoffs, and it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends, and they've even got beginner and casual contests where you'll play against people of a similar skill level. The best part, you get to draft a new team each day, and drafting a team is arguably the best part of fantasy. The only thing that's better is winning cash doing it. Just ask Dan from St. Louis or Jeremy from Austin. They both turned a $3 entry into $1,000. Huge cash prizes and bragging rights await only at DraftKings. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com free with your first deposit for your share in $10,000 in total cash prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use CLNS at DraftKings.com. Choose your lineup and you can seriously cash in. That's code CLNS only at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. A minimum $5 deposit is required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. All right, gentlemen, let's talk about what happened before. I don't even want to get into it. I was furious, but let's talk about what happened before the tribute to Paul Pierce, which is really probably the worst defensive showing in a while. And I understand Cleveland's good and they have got a lot of great players, but that compilation just came together. For them to just completely trounce on this defense is pretty sad. And I felt at the time disrespectful to Paul. Like, come on, man. You guys got to keep it within 10 at least and put on a show at the end. And instead, they just completely bombed.
Yeah, and Paul Pierce again entered into meme territory with his blank stare sitting on the sideline.
Not just him, the whole crew,
yeah,
right,
everybody.
Doc?
It was,
no wonder Doc was talking about beer. It was the only thing he had going for sitting on the sidelines.
Great point. And I'm going to tell everybody this because I caught so much flack on deadline day. A lot of people were having fun with the Cavaliers. They were dumping off the pieces that people did not see contributing to them at all. Isaiah Thomas, Derrick Rose, Jay Crowder, all of them gone. And they bring in Rodney Hood, George Hill, Larry Nance, and Jordan Clarkson. And everyone's like, wow, great role players. What are they going to do with these guys? And I heard from numerous people that these players weren't going to make a difference for the Cavs. I said at the time that the Cavaliers were once again prohibitive favorites in the East because these guys can ball. None of them were in great situations. Hood in particular in Utah, that team was on the downturn this year. And now you put catch and shoot guys with LeBron, extra ball handlers with LeBron, and defenders with LeBron. George Hill is an all-world defender at that point guard spot. A Spurs, Pacers conference final warrior with both of them. That guy has experience, two-way productivity. All four of those guys can ball, even Nance in his first year in the league. And that team, you saw it today. They got 18 to 33 contribution from those four guys. LeBron got to play 29 minutes after a season where he's been playing over 35, upwards of 40 all year long. And they played defense. They held the Celtics to nothing offensively on top of scoring 120. That team is scary again.
I'm going to let Jon jump in on that. I felt like we didn't play offense.
I am scared of that team again.
Don't be scared, Bobby. It's gonna be okay. No, I think that the issue is, because I saw you were saying that on deadline day, and I think that they have a chance probably to be better, be the best team in the league with this lineup. I don't think today's indicative of anything though, and I don't think the Toronto game is indicative of much. I felt like both games were really situations where the Celtics are in a funk. They're not playing like themselves. They're missing. They're not doing what they should be doing.
And I think they're missing Marcus Smart.
No, I'm not saying that. No, I think that there is an issue there. But to go to your point though, Bobby, I think that what LeBron has, it's going to go one of a couple ways. All right. He's got the young players. He's got these guys that are, they're impressionable. They're young. They're ready to go out there and bust their butts to help him, and maybe that's the way that a great team has to be built around him now. It's kind of going back to the 08, 09, 10 model of the Cavs, which is LeBron's up here and everybody else is down here. It's not, a three-headed monster. It's, a lot of these guys passing and moving. It could work. I could see it working. But I also think, the type of intensity both Toronto and Cleveland played with today, you're not going to see that on a regular basis. You're not going to see it on a regular basis, even in the playoffs. Nobody has that type of intensity. The Celtics have a target on their back. And right now, not only are they playing badly, but everybody wants to kick him in the teeth. So the Celtics have got to find a way to fight back. And in that case, they are missing Marcus Smart. But quite frankly, where's Aaron Baines needs to be more tenacious and much more tough out there. Morris has got to be that guy that we expect to kind of mix it up and kind of muck up a game.
Yeah, he was strong offensively.
Now they're not tough.
Yeah. Offensively, Morris played excellently, considering. But when we thought we were getting the guy who had a statistical advantage on LeBron that was an outlier in the league, I definitely thought, I know he sagged off of him, and I think that was fine, but I expected him to play a lot tougher. And there was one foul, I think it was Monroe, who wrapped up LeBron like he was, touching him with pillows. It was like, dude, if you're going to foul LeBron coming up the lane, you got to screw him up a little bit.
Yeah, and the Cavaliers did that to the Celtics today. Tough interior presence by Tristan Thompson. I know that was one of your big things that you've taught me, Justin. If you're going to foul hard. And the Cavaliers did that and prevented baskets today. They just looked rock solid top to bottom. And on Marcus Morris, he really hasn't been the defender that people anticipate him being, which is quite disappointing because I think early in the season that brought the Celtics away from being a small team, which they want to be. And now we are so far away from small ball. It's unbelievable. You're seeing Jason Tatum play at the 2. They're really gearing toward 2 big lineups now with Tice, Monroe, Baines, Monroe, Horford in that mix. It's very awkward to see on a Brad Stevens team how big they're playing right now, but they have no choice. If they chose to bring Monroe in here and now they have to play these minutes, play these lineups and adjust to him, have him adjust to this team. And that's part of this process right now too. The Celtics are not only missing Smart, but they're in the middle of an integration period for a new player who hasn't played in weeks, and Monroe has not looked good.
It's early. He's got to learn
It's early,
for a little
but
bit. He's had,
yeah,
you
but
know,
that is part
Kyrie
of this.
found him. Kyrie found him. He can finish at the rim. Nobody expected him to be a defensive giant. And another former Celtic, Joe Johnson, got bought out on Paul Pierce Day. So that's been a target reportedly for the Celtics. Maybe that's some more offense off the bench. Looks like Isaiah got his magic back in LA. So my pipe dream of him returning to Boston after a buyout for postseason run may be quashed. But
That
I
would
want
have been top tier disrespectful.
would have been awesome. Would have been awesome. So John, tell me what you think of Monroe, your initial thoughts. Do you have hopes for him? And then, do you want any part of Joe Johnson, or are you waiting for things to just go horrendous in LA and maybe the dream still happens?
I'm trying to, Bobby, remember a year ago here, you were very pessimistic and things worked out. So I feel like another positive experience is going to happen for the Celtics here. I mean, look, I think we overplay our hand in terms of what these deadline deals and what they end up being. The Celtics are going to have having problems regardless of Monroe or whatnot. I think Baines has honestly been a bit of a disappointment here over the last month. I think that Tatum has kind of backslid as a player. I think that Brown had a good run there last week and then really didn't show up all that well, certainly against the Cavs, and then I'm not so sure he was really that great against the Pacers either. So you get up to these situations, and I feel like it's a lot of confluing, a lot of issues coming together at once. Monroe, to me, it will take time. It's going to take until after the All-Star break, I think, before we can really judge where he is. The Celtics still have a need on the wing. I would have liked to have seen them fill that need at the trade deadline. It didn't work out. The cost was too high. I still think there's going to be guys out there. It sounds like Joe Johnson's headed to Houston. If that happens, who's their alternative? There's not a lot. Bellinelli's headed to the Sixers. So is somebody else going to be bought out? I'm still looking at Tyreke Evans. I think Tyreke Evans is not happy with the fact that he got held out of it for a week of practice, held out for a week of games, and now is saying like, well, what's going to happen here? I was on the market, and now I'm going to be stuck on a team that's going to play for another, basically obscurity for another 2 months, and then no one's going to see me. And now Lou Williams is getting $7 million a year. My payday could be gone if I don't get to the playoffs. If I'm Tyreke Evans, I'm telling Chris Wallace, buy me out of here and let me go join a contender. And if that happens, then that's the greatest of all worlds, because then the Celtics add probably the target of their whole dreams at the deadline and Greg Monroe. I still think that would
be continued genius on Danny Ainge's part, not even giving up a second round pick. I mean, I was kind of willing to give up a first round pick and maybe even consider Marcus. He slid down my favoritism. He slid out of favoritism for the first time. How long have I been back in Marcus? But boy, that would be a complete heist if they found a way to get Tyreke Evans without giving up anything, Bobby.
I just still don't know where this newfound fascination with Tyreke Evans came from. The guy was a bust out of college, did not play well in Sacramento, played horrifically in New Orleans to the point where he's lucky he landed in Memphis. Now he's getting more than 14 shots a night, all the ball time now that Mike Conley's gone down. And people expected him to fit in with varying minutes and varying ball time in Boston. I never liked the idea of it. I was nowhere close to saying I would give up Marcus Smart for him, never mind a first round pick. And the Celtics held firm on that too. Second round picks was all they were willing to give up. That was all any team in the league was willing to give up, by the way, if you see the reports, which is very telling. This guy was overrated at the deadline, and there's a reason no one really reached out far to go get this guy.
I'm probably a little bit more optimistic with him, and then you're right. The usage on him was just off the charts. So it is kind of like, okay, now you're going to play a role 20 minutes a night if you're lucky. I think that's a lot to ask. And you're right, to have him fit into that, Bobby, is absolutely an issue. I think the one thing I would say though, his shooting percentages are good. His ability to distribute the ball is good. He rebounds. He's got size and he's got versatility. He's not a perfect fit, but for a guy in the buyout market, I think he probably can fill the bill for him. His shooting hasn't been as great in terms of the last month, but if you go into the game logs and see kind of where that fits in, it's not that far above the range. And, look, if you look at, people say, well, the last month is more indicative of who he is as a shooter. It looks like 2 years ago, he was around 40% as well. So even though in his early part of his career, he could not shoot at all, he has made amends there, and it sounds like he's much more along the lines of 35, 36, 37%, probably than the 40% we saw earlier, but not the 29% that he's been the last month. So it probably balances out. I'd like to see it happen. But the reason I think, that's kind of the other, which is, how much you're really going to pay to get this guy. If he's just a guy who you're not giving up much for, it's a flyer. You're going to lose, Abdul Nader for Tyreke Evans. To me, that's a trade I would take, and take it every day.
Well, the thing is, too, on the second unit, the usage rate can still be high, especially with a unit that's struggling so hard to generate offense. I mean, we're not talking about securing him for the starting lineup where Al Horford facilitates the offense and then also Kyrie Irving facilitates the offense. This is a player that would be in a role that would require some high utilization in shorter minutes. So I do think he would be a big pick-me-up. I mean, think about it this way. The championship team that Paul Pierce was on won with really only two players outside of the starting lineup in Eddie House and James Posey. And yet this team has got a lot of depth, but it's a lot of young depth. The biggest pick-me-up would be Gordon Hayward. We're talking about him potentially being ready to come back at the end of March. He's looking pretty good. Jared Weiss saw him at the game and tweeted out that he was walking around like somebody who had two good ankles. So it sounds like he's, obviously there's a lot of healing to be done in that ankle. It's not like running and jumping on it, but we're not even halfway through February. I mean, even if he's able to lightly jog by the beginning of March, you have to think that there's a shot he's able to come back and play some minutes in the postseason. That'll be the biggest pick-me-up, but I do think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some insurance. It's really not going to have any impact, again, as it's been the last couple of years, on their draft standings with their biggest pick for next year. So why not go after it as long as it doesn't cost much?
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, they're not giving up that first round pick now. It's just we're waiting on the buyout if it does happen. But Ainge does like having a draft pick every single year. All but 2 years of his career, he has drafted a player in the first round. That's why you heard speculation that they trade Smart for another first rounder to flip to Memphis. But that ultimately didn't come to fruition either. Smart's value wasn't that high around the deadline himself. But I like Smart better on that second unit than I'd like Evans. I still think people are down on Smart because of the whole picture incident, disappointing shooting this year. But his defense is as good as it's ever been. I still think he's a vital cog on that perimeter defense that they have going. And I think they have a pretty good chance to re-sign him this summer at a very good deal, which you wouldn't have gotten with Evans. Evans would have been a pure rental. If you did give up Smart, you would have been giving up a player, possibly a long-term player with this team. I don't think he's going to be a long-term player with this team. This summer is probably when he gets
What do you think?
but
$10 million for Smart at this point? Do you think he bottomed out in value because of this cut in his hand and having the hissy fit and not really improving any of his shooting percentages?
His value is very close to its rock bottom at this point. I don't think a lot of teams with room are going to use that room on a big offer sheet with some of the other free agents who are floating around this summer. The Clippers in particular were a team that came out with cap space that I said, all right, maybe they'll be a team that reaches at him, but I don't see it anymore. I think their ambitions are still higher than that. And in the meantime, Ainge can throw a deal at Smart, a fair deal in the early days, just like he did with Avery Bradley, and then try to stick with that. And then if he does have Smart in here,
Oklahoma City showed some interest, though. Oklahoma City showed some interest at the trade deadline. He's obviously from the area, but they have no room. Well, it just depends on how things play out, right? I mean, they could have cap room. John, do you think there's any truth to the interest in Marcus Smart other than him having just grown up in the area?
I'm sorry.
From OKC.
I think there's some. I think there was a need once Roberson went down that they needed somebody to fill that defensive, take the other team's best scorer piece alongside, Paul George. When you go against Oklahoma City, when you're in Oklahoma City and you're going against the Golden State Warriors, you need guys like that. But whether or not I think you're right in terms of the market. I mean, I think you see Lou Williams sign a deal, 3 years, $21 million. I mean, that and a TL option on the third year. There is a massive correction coming to this market for free agents. And Marcus Smart's value, he was looking for north of what Evan Turner got, north of what, Kelly Olynyk got. He was thinking $18 million a year, and you just may well take that one away. and he's going to be lucky if he gets $8-9 million in this market for a guy who's not a starting guard right now. I mean, and it's hard to argue that he would be a starting guard in most teams. So I think he ends up signing here. I think he gets a short-term deal and stays here for, maybe $8 million a year for 3 years. It becomes an Avery Bradley type deal. And I think that's probably the best thing for the Celtics and the best thing, for Marcus Smart going forward, because I don't think anyone values him more than the Celtics do.
Here's this too. Well, Braun is a free agent this summer, so the whole market is going to be stalled while he makes his decision. That's going to buy the Celtics some vital time to work this out with Smart. That's their only focus this summer. The Celtics don't have the cap space to be involved with a big free agent this summer, so priority number one is going to be locking up Smart. That and his drop value is really working in the team's hands right now, and another reason I think they didn't deal him, even with all the talk of that going on.
I do think, one thing I would say though, Bobby, I think that Ainge is right that he was asking for a lot. I think it was more than just the number one. I think he wanted a number one and he wanted a rotation player and Danny doing what Danny does, which is asking for the world and expecting to give up very little. And, a guy becoming a restricted free agent in just, a handful of months, and you're asking for all that. But Danny can do that. He's sitting on all these assets. He doesn't have to make the deal. And I think, when you put it in the scope of all those things, if he got, a rotation player and he got that number one pick, he could flip for Tyreke Evans, and who knows something else. I mean, man, then you can understand making that move. But, as it is, I'm happy with keeping Marcus Smart. And I think, he's a key rotation piece for this team. And if the market correction comes the way it is, it helps the Celtics cap situation and it helps their ability to add a piece that they can trade, for that. Yeah, Anthony Davis trade. That's the Celtics are, circling around, for the next, 18 to 24 months.
All right, we have 2 minutes left, so we're going to have to wrap. But we've got one game on deck before All-Star. See how I do that? I just jump right in. Take control. 2 minutes left. I want to know what you think is going to happen with the Clippers game, post-sentimentality from Doc Rivers. Maybe we could get him to sit in the stands and have a beer. Again, it's 8 p.m. It's Wednesday. It's on ESPN. What's the outcome? Make your predictions, and then we wrap.
Yeah, Celtics will win that one. I'm not big on the Clippers right now. They added Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, but I mean, there's not a lot to love there.
Do they get an Avery Bradley tribute video? The Isaiah one was missing anyway. What kind of?
I think they already did that, didn't they?
Did they already do it? Yeah, I guess they did do that, didn't they?
Yeah. I think the Celtics win by 20. I think they are going to 2 days of practice, not wanting to enter the All-Star break on a bad note and a number of days off. I think they're going to come out. They're going to play with the type of intensity that they've received from Toronto and received from Cleveland. And I think they're going to enter in a big way. Does it mean that their problems are solved? No, it doesn't. But I do think that they're going to at least exit with a big win before the break here on Wednesday.
I will say Jaylen Brown is solving a lot of their problems with his consistency of late. I'm seeing a lot of growth from him in these last 2 weeks.
Ball handling. Yeah, ball handling. We don't have time to vet this one, but I will say as we wrap, his ball handling has been way better. He had a nice behind the back move while he was still on the run towards the rim. A lot of good control, just shots not falling against the Cavs. And defensively, it's been documented that, he's very good at that number 2 spot and filled in statistically negligible difference last year when Avery Bradley went down for 20 games. So he is coming a long way. Tatum seemed to be back on the right track, but I think he's skidding again a little bit. So he's a roller coaster ride right now, but that's going to do it for this week's show. The broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin, at CSL_Duke, and our guest on today's show at Real Bobby Manning. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for
Real
tuning.
Bob
It's Bob.
Manning.
It's Bob. I was going to say, I knew it wasn't Bobby. At Real Bob Manning. And a heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember that you can help support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. For staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, the founder of CLNS Media Nick Gelso, and my co-host John Duke, I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.